Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to hang out for a moment and let you guys join. Give yourself a second to get a warm cup of tea or coffee. And it's 8 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and start. This is, we are going to be cramming for Unit 4, which is about imperfect competition. Imperfect competition. Now we spent two cram sessions going over cost curves and production and theory of the firm. And then we spent the last one really going into what does it mean for perfect competition? What is this market structure? So we talked a lot about market structure of perfect competition and how it doesn't have deadweight loss. It's very efficient. It's perfectly efficient allocatively as well as productively efficient. So it has the most bang for your buck, so to speak. So we're going to be looking at today Unit 4, which is imperfect. So once again, we're going to be, just so you know, you've got, even on Discord, we've got Sharia who's going to be there taking some questions. I'm going to stick to chat tonight just so that I can grab some questions. I'm very excited about this, and so should you be. This is great. Test is coming up, folks, and you're going to be ready. So let's go ahead and and just as a reminder, just be careful of what you say because it can be recorded. Go ahead and visit our social media website, social media spots. We'd love to interact with students and help you get that 5 that you so desperately want. So we're looking at also we've had 3 quick crams in a row. So you guys are troopers. We have gone through this and we're going to keep going. We got Unit 5 and Unit 6 to go. So on April 1st, and no, it's not April Fool's Day. Well, I mean, it is, but micro's not a joke. So we're going to be looking at Unit 5, which is the factor market, and that one confuses a lot of people. So we're going to take a moment and we're going to really kind of nail down the major issues with the factor market. Then on March 26th, so that's tomorrow night, Friday night at 10 p.m. Daylight time, we've got the Unit 4 trivia. That's going to be fun, and also it's going to use one of our new little toys that we've got going with trivia at Fiveable. Really fun stuff, and I'm excited to see us work with it. And as always, I and Sharia are going to be on Discord. We can handle some questions there, and happy to help you go through on your micro journey of success. So tonight's going to be a tiny bit different because I want to slow down and really show you guys the step-by-step tools of graphing, especially with imperfect competition. Imperfect competition pops up a lot on the FRQs. You're going to see a lot of monopolies, and monopolistic competition will throw a curveball every once in a while. So I'm just going to really slow down and go step by step. How do you actually graph this out? So let's go ahead and take a peek. So we're going to do a lot of practice in this round. We're also going to have a little Q&A at the very end. And so go ahead and throw questions, as many questions as you want into chat. Again, we're available on Discord. But for tonight, go ahead and throw them into chat, and I will pick them up, or Sharia will pick them up, either one. So let's get into it with a comparison of perfect competition. Now, perfect competition, we talked about that. That's the 3.7. Perfect competition is a market structure. That cost curves kind of stay the same, but the market structure tells, it kind of gives the rules of the game. Soccer, basketball, lacrosse, they all have different types of equipment, but it only is going to really factor in if you know the rules of the game. You know which one, if they belong with each other, or if the basketball is on a basketball court, it's going to fit. Same thing with market structure. That if you are looking at certain characteristics of a market, it will behave a certain way. You're playing by that market's rules. None of them are bad. I've heard a couple of the comments on that one. And none of these market structures are inherently bad. They just have different uses for them. And some of them slightly illegal in the United States because we do trust busting here. But that's not the case with everywhere. So let's remind ourselves some of the big characteristics with perfect competition. First off, low to no barriers to entry. We are talking about identical products here. This is buying corn on the side of the road with some person selling it out of their truck. That this is how hard is it to go sell fruit by the side of the road? And it's very hard with agriculture, but it's in terms of how much is it really going to cost you? You get a basket of fruit, you get in your truck, drive to the highway park, sit in the shade for a little bit as people come by. If you don't sell anything, well, you're going to shut down and you're going to drive away and go home and find some work. So identical products, low to no barriers to entry, many sellers. Theoretically, we're talking about infinite amount of sellers, so a lot of sellers. Because there are a lot of sellers with perfect substitutes for goods, they have to take the price that's given to them by the market. This is why you have to draw two graphs for perfect competition. In imperfect competition, where we're going to transition tonight, there are three distinct types of imperfect competition, and they all have their issues. But there are some things that tend to be the same. First off, cost curves are going to be the same. We'll talk about that in a second. But there are going to be barriers to entry. Even with monopolistic competition, they're still slightly higher than that of perfect competition. For example, yes, it's going to be easier, or it's going to be less costly to start a restaurant compared to a power plant. But compared to the truck, restaurant's pretty expensive. So there are going to be barriers to entry, and some are very, very high. We're going to talk about monopolies and oligopolies later on. They also have different products. And again, this is going to be something we're going to talk about, and how do they get those different products or differentiated products, which is another thing. There's fewer sellers on this situation, meaning that it's a little bit more strategic in its competition. There's still a lot in monopolistic competition, but not nearly as many as perfect competition. And because of that, they are price makers. They get to, whereas perfect competition had to take the price from the market, otherwise they wouldn't sell it or they'd run out of it and not get any profit, that the price maker has this new responsibility to actually set the price. All right, so what happens? Think about the graph here. Now, if you remember your perfect competition graph and you had that perfectly elastic demand curve, Mr. Darp taking a nap, you had that perfectly elastic demand curve that just went right across the second graph for the individual firm. But let's look at what happens to marginal revenue if you're a price maker rather than a price taker. So let's take a peek. All right, so I've got a little graph. If you've got, please have pen and paper or pencil and paper right now, so that we're going to work through a few of these. If you've got the slides, great. Don't look at them. We're going to let's go ahead and have a little bit of practice. All right, I want to show you what's happening. And what I want you to look at with this little graph or this little grid is the price and the MR. Remember, Mr. Darp, MR is going to equal P or price is going to equal the marginal revenue in perfect competition. With imperfect competition, we've got something else happening. And let's explain what's going on. All right. So I'm trying to sell a unique product. Let's go ahead and say that I am selling square watermelons. They're very, very niche thing. They do exist though, pretty cool looking things. So I'm selling square watermelons. At $11, nobody wants to buy them. So if I look at my grid, price equals $11, the quantity demanded equals 0, and your total revenue is P times Q, or otherwise it would be 11 times 0. And the MR, well, I haven't had a change yet, and I'm not doing calculus with partial derivatives here, so we're not going to worry about this. But the change hasn't happened yet, so I really don't have a marginal revenue line. But then Adam is like, dude, I love square watermelons. I'll buy it. Now, Adam's the only one who's willing to pay $10 for this watermelon. But think about what my total revenue is going to be. 1 times 10 is going to equal, and your first fill in here, total revenue equals $10. But your marginal revenue, the change here, I went from nothing or my total revenue was 0. Now my total revenue is 10. My marginal revenue will be 10 as well. So they're starting in the same place. So go ahead, and I'm going to give you about 20 seconds. If you're watching this on replay, go ahead and pause. And I would like you to finish that grid and see if you at least just have the concept. Again, if you've got questions, go ahead and throw them in chat. Happy to help. About 10 more seconds. Okay, so let's set up the monopolist dilemma, or the imperfect competition's dilemma here. So I only have Adam, who's willing to pay $10 for a square watermelon. What do I have to do in order to elicit more demand for these square watermelons? Well, if I'm going to keep the price the same for everybody, like just put a sticker next to the truck that says square watermelons for sale, I need to lower the price. So if I lower the price, so let's say Adam is willing to pay for it at $10. At $9, Adam and Barbara are both willing to pay $9 for the square watermelon monstrosity. So in this point, it's going to be $9 times 2 is going to be 18. And what's my MR at that point? Well, here we go. Does this look familiar? Hopefully you've got it correct. All right, so at 8, if I want 3 people to buy this watermelon, well, now I got to get Adam, Barbara, and Carl to actually buy these watermelons, but I got to lower the price to $8. Well, 8 times 3, 24. Movement from 18 to 24 is $6, but look what's happening. As soon as I go from $10 to $9, price no longer equals the MR. So 9 does not equal 8. So this is a problem. We now have a split graph. Mr. Darp is no longer there. Mr. Darp only camps out in perfect competition. But here, price does not equal the MR. MR is going to be downward sloping. Demand is going to return to its downward sloping look. All right, so demand, D for down. So D for demand, it's downward sloping. What I'd like you to do is get ready to graph a little bit with me. Okay, notice what happens as we drop the price, because if I'm a price maker and I get to make this price, it's dropping for everyone. I am putting up a new for sale sign. And look what happens to the total revenue. The total revenue peaks. This should look familiar, folks. This should look like what we've got with total production. Total production does not go up forever. It does come down. The marginal revenue, where total revenue is going to be at its peak, when marginal revenue is 0. I will repeat that because it's important and it comes back to haunt you. Total revenue is at its highest, its apex, its apogee. It's at its highest when MR equals 0. MR equals 0. I want you to get this mental image of a tiny little grandma who's squishing the last drop of juice out of an orange. She is going to use it. So this is going to be the look of what we're going to call a monopoly. And it's going to, a lot of other things too. So let's start with a monopoly. And I start with a monopoly because it is the absolute opposite of perfect competition. Perfect competition is many sellers. It's, or many sellers. It's perfect substitutes for its goods. It's got low to no barriers to entry. It doesn't really need advertising except for somebody with a sign on their truck. All right. This monopoly, complete opposite. From many sellers, we have mono means one. All right. A monopoly is a market structure where there's only one seller. And this is really crucial here because you're only going to have to graph once, because in a monopoly, the market is the firm and the firm is the market. So a monopoly has one seller. It's one either company, it's one group. They have one seller of this product. There are no substitutes for it. And you're like, well, how do you not get substitutes for it? Remember last week when we were talking about patents? Well, this is where they come in. It could be a really unique thing. For example, if you're watching spaceflight at all and you're watching SpaceX take off, well, you can't just be like, I took a lot of pictures of those Raptor engines, so I'm gonna I'm going to absolutely copy them and sell it myself. No, there's a patent on them, and a very expensive one too. So there's a patent on them that the government says you cannot, that we're going to protect the intellectual property of this so that only this maker for these many years can actually profit from there. So that's one of the high barriers to entry. So government action is going to be a barrier to entry. Economies of scale is another big one. So if you've got for example, let's say you want to have oh, there we go. Oh, I hope it's not echoing. Okay, I'm sorry, Sai. So if you want to have, sorry about that. So for high barriers to entry, I want you to think about, if you want to make a competing YouTube service, a competing video service, what would have to happen for you to go head to head with YouTube? The problem is that if you wanted to go head to head with YouTube, YouTube has already had years of experience. They have their own preferred dealers. They've got their own system going. It's going to take you a long time and a very expensive time to drop the cost across the board to get to those economies of scale. All right. There's some advertising with monopolies, but they don't. Sometimes they need to alert you of their products, but they're the price maker. They're the price maker of the entire market or the entire industry of their market. Sometimes, though, we want monopolies. That's why I'm saying that it's not inherently bad if one person, there's not a moral issue here. It's good to have one business because sometimes competition is going to cause more cost than it's worth. And I like to use the example of, what if you had competing sewage companies that were vying for your business? No pun intended. But let's say that you have competing sewage companies and one of the sewage companies goes out of business. Well, this is a problem because there's a lot of sewer pipes that are just going to be left to rot. They'd be let in the water. There's a mess everywhere that's for somebody, environmental spillover. So in some cases that the government is just going to step in and say, look, we need a big company to keep the costs low. And we really can't handle the environmental costs or the outside external costs that are going to come about because of competition with this. So we're going to kind of salute to one company. Power companies are another big one that they're going to take care of it. They're going to bring those costs down, and we'll go from there. All right. So with monopolies, there we go. We're going to practice graphing. So I want to just really kind of walk you through this. So if you've got pen and paper with you, go ahead and graph with me. So the first thing we do, so again, for those of you who are learning this on your own, you may not know what comes first. So this comes first. Your axes always come first, and you're going to label them. So on the vertical, we're going to have price. On the horizontal, we have quantity, or Q. Firm is going to be the industry, so we only need one graph, and to which I say yay. So we've got price and quantity. Hopefully you've got that all mapped out. Great. And we're going to then add our big MR and D. All right, so we're going to split the marginal revenue and the demand curves. Just as a reminder, because students do switch these around occasionally, marginal revenue is always going to be to the left of demand, okay? If you want to think demand defender, that D kind of is downward sloping, it's defending the marginal revenue line. So it's standing outside. So go ahead and graph that. And now add those pesky little cost curves. Cost curves haven't changed. They haven't changed. They're going to look very much the same. The minimum, you're going to hit the minimum of ATC, or your average total cost, and your average variable cost, where they intersect with the marginal cost line. So there's no change to the cost curve. So what we learned in 3.1 through 3.6 is still the same. And how we're going to find profit and all that, still the same. Just it's our marginal revenue and our demand curves that have really changed on us. So go ahead, I'll give you a second to graph. Remember, total cost is fixed cost plus variable cost. So your average variable cost plus your average fixed cost equals your average total cost. Average total cost is always going to be above your AVC. All right, average total cost always above your AVC line. and they're going to start coming together, but they will never, ever, ever touch. If they touch in this PowerPoint, it's because I have made a mistake. Hopefully I've corrected those. But AVC and ATC, they get very, very, very close. They're like siblings in the back of a car on a long trip going, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. They get very, very close, but they will always have AFC in between them. All right, so now we're going to profit maximize. And guys, if you have not learned this before, if you're self-studying, this will trick you. All right, remember, every market structure profit maximizes. When we say profit maximize or even loss minimize, we are talking about MR equals C. Your eyes need to go there absolutely first. So when you get this mess of lines, first thing you do is you look to see where does the MR intersect with the MC, the marginal cost and marginal revenue. Go ahead and stick a dot where they hit. And I'm around a lot of water in Florida, and so I look at this like a little boat. And I would just say drop the anchor. So when you drop the anchor, a little dotted line, hit the quantity line. I'm going to put QM1 here. And the reason why is I'm saying this is the quantity produced by a monopoly. And 1, because it's probably going to move. But notice how I have not connected to price yet. I have just, this is the quantity I am going to produce to. All right, this is the this is where at this quantity, I am going to maximize profit. All right, now let's talk price. You aren't done here, and this is where a lot of students make mistakes, so careful. So I've dropped my anchor, but now I'm going to plant my flag. All right, so I'm going to make a dotted line. So I first drop my anchor to get my quantity, and then I'm going to go up from my original dot to where it hits the demand curve. Because remember, the demand curve is what the people that are going to buy your stuff, that's where they're going to buy it. That's the price at which those people will buy it. So we're going to make a dotted line up from the MRT equal MC point, the profit maximizing point, to the demand line. Then go ahead and make a dot. Hopefully you're all following along. Great. And from that dot, that's your price. All right, and I'm going to put price or PM1, just indicating that this is a monopolist price. Monopoly, they're the only ones that are able to deal with this. They're the only ones with the square watermelons available for sale. They have a monopoly, which means they set the price. And they are always going to set the price so they can get the biggest profit they can. All right. Now, just so you guys can see it, if we were to go, let me go back real quick. If we were to go back, this is just like we did with perfect competition. How do you know if you're making a profit? Well, if your price is above the ATC, you're making a profit. So if we are making, in this situation, I'm going to drop down, I'm going to make a box from where the ATC or the my profit maximizing point connects with my average total cost. That anything above the average total cost is the profit. Anything below that, below the ATC, that's your total cost. With their powers combined, profit plus total cost is going to equal your total revenue. So get ready, because sometimes the test is going to give you, they'll give you the total revenue and the total profit, and you got to figure out the total cost. Sometimes they'll make you find the area of a rectangle. So don't lose sight on your geometry or your algebra, because it's coming back. Okay, so I want you to look at this graph real quick, and maybe the graph that you drew, and I want you to think to yourself, is this allocative, is this market structure allocatively efficient? And I need you, I tell my kids that they need to memorize this. I always am saying, like, you maybe, draw, make little notes behind your eyelids, because you need to know this. Please don't. But you need to know this. Please, this is one of those things where you need to memorize, get it on a flashcard, make a Quizlet, do something. But you're going to need this formula because it's really, really handy. So is it allocatively efficient? When we say allocatively, we're saying, is the right amount being made? So is the right amount being made? Because right now we're at QM1, but is that the right amount? That's the question. Is it allocatively efficient? Well, thankfully in economics, we actually get a formula. We know where allocative efficiency is. It's where price equals marginal cost. Now, if you remember, P equals M, in perfect competition, P equals MR equals D equals AR. So that P automatically it was MR equals MC. Perfect competition was easy. Perfect competition was always allocatively efficient. But where is it with a monopoly? So take a look at your graph and take a guess real quick. If you answered no, you are correct, because it's not. Your price, that little black dot above it, I've put where the yellow dot is. That would be with like perfect competition, kind of where MR would equal MC on that part. But if it were perfectly elastic. So P is going to be higher than MR equals MC, meaning they're not making enough. Look where that MC crosses the demand curve. You would have way more units being produced if you were producing them at that price. But instead, the monopolist is profit seeking. So they're going to make less than what society really wants. And the reason they're making less is because it's got too high of a price because they're profit maximized. Now I want you to think about productive efficiency. Is this going to be productively efficient? Meaning, am I making this at the minimum ATC point? And I know where the minimum of ATC is because it's where I intersect the MC with MC. So is this productively efficient? Am I making goods at the lowest total cost? And the answer is no, I'm not. All right, I'm not. I am paying higher costs because I'm producing fewer goods that are socially optimal. So I'm paying those higher costs because, well, even with higher costs, I'm profit maximized. Now, I want you to look at this graph and think of what we learned in Unit 2, and you're probably going to discover that, ooh, this is going to make for some odd consumer and producer surplus issues. And I would say yes, because we do not have an efficient market structure here. This market structure has surplus issues, and it also means it has our friend deadweight loss. Deadweight loss is back. And deadweight loss will be back with us for a while because we're going to be in imperfect competition. Imperfect equals inefficient. So we've got surplus issues. Now, consumer surplus, there's still some consumer surplus because Adam, who was willing to pay $10 for that square watermelon, Adam, he still only ends up paying $6. So he saves $4 right there. There's still consumer surplus, but it's not nearly as much as it was in the past. Also, notice that since I've got that high price, I lose the ability to produce to where that D equals MC part, that socially optimal part. So I've got that deadweight loss, meaning I could produce there, but I haven't. So that means you're going to have higher producer surplus because the monopoly is going to like their profit. Thank you very much. But we're going to have a little bit less consumer surplus. And then you're like, well, why do they ever do this? It seems goofy. And the answer is it's useful sometimes. Because and I talked about this with the sewage company, that if the cost of competition drive up total cost in general, meaning economic costs, this is, for example, environmental factors. If you've got social issues, you may just want to give the company a natural monopoly. So a natural monopoly, now I want you to look back, look at the cost curves. A natural monopoly happens when you have a downward sloping ATC. This ATC that you see in front of you right now, the economies of scale hasn't gotten to a point where we can start going upwards yet. Okay, it hasn't gotten there yet. So they aren't great all the time, but they're useful when the socially optimal quantity, that's going to be your MC equals D. I've got the little gray dot there. That's the socially optimal quantity. Now, where would it be otherwise? Well, before you're going to change it to where MC equals MR, and that's going to really decrease the production of it. So I want to hit, if I'm government or if I'm any sort of civil engineer, I want to make sure that there is enough quantity being made that regardless of who gets paid. So this is what we call a natural monopoly. A natural monopoly is legally one firm getting to use economies of scale, meaning those mass production techniques, that they get to use economies of scale to decrease the prices for all consumers. So, but here's the thing, look where the ATC is relative to the QSO. That gray dot is underneath the ATC. Now, if you are profit maximizing, you are not going to willingly go to a place where you're you're making less than total cost because you're taking an L, you're taking a loss. So instead, what do? If a government really wants to have this happen, they're going to have to subsidize. Subsidize per unit means subsidy means that they're going to pay you for each unit you create. So if the government decides, hey, you know those square watermelons you've got, they're awesome. So if they're awesome, we want everybody to have them. And I'm like, that's great, but I can't go lower than $4. They're like, look, we're going to charge people $2. If you charge them $2, we will pay you another $2 to cover the cost. And that's what happens. That if you've got, this is the reason why some of your utilities companies, in order to keep prices low and controlled, utilities companies are going to get payments from the government and subsidies from the government itself so that they can continue to give things prices that are lower. Now, a monopoly is only going to produce in an elastic range. Doesn't make sense to do it in the inelastic range. So this is how you know whether or not to graph or not. This is kind of like FRQ. Sometimes they'll throw a curveball, multiple choice question in here with this one. So I just want you to kind of have this in mind. How do you know when you switch over from an elastic range in the curve to an inelastic range? You look for where MR equals 0. Now remember, MR equals 0 means that your total revenue is at its apogee. It's at its peak. So this means that, hey, I can use that total revenue test to see if this thing's elastic or not. So I'm going to give you a real quick one. If the price decreases, but total revenue is going to increase, you've got an elastic part of the range. Okay, it's the elastic monopoly is going to produce. If the price decreases, but TR decreases or the total revenue decreases, that means you're in the inelastic range, and monopoly's not going to produce. Not without heavy, heavy subsidies, and even then it may not. So it will only produce in the elastic range. This thing comes back, so just kind of keep that in mind. All right, so let's talk about price discrimination. So price discrimination, this is a toughie, and I think, did I do this? There it is. So price discrimination, this is a different type of monopoly and a different type of graph. So go ahead, and what I'd like you to do is start again. Just write on your paper, you've got monopoly. And by the way, we're going to show our graphs on Discord after this stream because we like to show our graphs. So if you go ahead and you've got your monopoly, the monopoly we've done before is called a non-price discriminating monopoly. So it's not price discriminating. Now we're going into price discrimination. This is still a monopoly, but this means that the seller can charge each individual buyer what they're willing to pay rather than just put a for sale sign by it. So who's willing to pay for square watermelons at $11? Nobody. But instead of just putting a sign by my truck by the side of the road, I instead go to Adam personally. I'm like, hey, Adam, I got this really cool looking watermelon. Would you like to buy it? And Adam goes, that's a square watermelon. That thing's awesome. $10. I'll pay $10 for it. But in his head, he's like, man, that's a really expensive watermelon. And still, he's going to buy it. So I sell him the watermelon for $10. Great. My total revenue is now 10. My marginal revenue is 10. Isn't that great? Well, then I see Barb, and Barb looks at me like I'm crazy because I've got this square watermelon. I'm like, you want to buy it for $10? And she goes, no, I don't want to buy it for $10. And I'm like, well, how about $9? And she goes, oh, okay, I'll buy it at $9. All right. But here's the thing. I don't go and tell Adam that I've sold the watermelon for less than what he bought it for. So now instead of saying, hey, Adam, you get to buy this watermelon for $9, I instead go, hey, Adam, your watermelon is $10. And I go to Barb and I'm like, hey, your watermelon is $9. So I take the $10 from Adam and I add the $9 from Barb, and that's how I get my total revenue. It's not P times Q. We are adding up the P's here. So now my marginal revenue is $9 because I took as much that Adam was willing to pay and I took as much as Barb was willing to pay. And then I'm like, hey, Casey, you want to buy, a square watermelon? He goes, that thing looks kind of cool. I'm like, $9. He goes, no way. He goes, how about $8? Okay, we can do $8. Well, now I've got $10 from Adam, $9 from Barb, $8 from Casey. Hey, we got $27. Isn't that great? That means, but the change from $19 to $27 for my marginal revenue, this is going to equal $8. Hey, do you guys see something nifty? My price is equaling my MR. Uh-oh, we've seen this before. This is great. All right, so my price is equaling my marginal revenue, which means I do not have to draw the normal monopoly curve. Okay, so that normal monopoly curve is going to change. Price discrimination, remember, it's price discrimination. I am going to isolate consumers. And we do this in real life. For example, plane tickets. Plane tickets, you don't go to a store anymore and see, oh, look at this flight to Washington State. If I go to Seattle, I have to go to Delta and I have to type in, oh, I want to travel from this airport to Seattle. And then it's going to give me a range of prices that are only really for me. And if I buy it, well, might drive up the price for somebody else. So it is very, very, very personal, and the price becomes an individual thing. Now, this will fall apart if it doesn't have a few parameters. This is completely profit motivated. So if you're not going to make profit out of this, if somebody's going to cheat the system, it's not going to work and they won't do it. So this is why a lot of things don't have price discrimination. So how do you have this? Well, first, you've got to have the majority market share. And by that, I mean a far surpassing that 69%, that 70% of market share. You need to own that industry in order to do it. Buyers also cannot resell. So you can't really do the ticket scalping thing. This is why even when you buy a plane ticket, that you can't just be like, hey, you want a plane ticket? You actually have to change names, pay the fees, and all that mess. Also, all purchases are private so that no one sees the other person's price. So if it matches those parameters, more than likely you're in the way for price discrimination. Price discrimination, if we were to graph this out, we're going to put our axes in, so P and Q. But notice what there isn't at this point. There's only, since P equals the MR, we're going to have demand and MR being in the same spot. So D is going to equal your marginal revenue. It's not split at this point. It is completely aligned. That means there's kind of, if you want to think about it just logically, there's two lines in the same space. They just kind of split if there's non-price discrimination. So again, where it crosses, we are all about the MR equaling MC. Our eyes go there first, and then we're going to drop an anchor from that point where MR equals MC, and that is going to tell us how much we're going to produce. So we're going to throw in our Q and M, meaning I don't know what that was. Monopoly. There you go. So we're going to put in our Q and M at that point, and we're going to have, it's above the ATC, so we know we're making a profit. But notice what there isn't. There is not a price line, because remember, the MR equals the price. The price is all along the line. Every individual data point has its own price set. So there's not a dotted line to a specific part of the price curve or of the price axes. So, and also, if MR equals price, that means there is no consumer surplus. No consumer surplus at all. Because if Adam is willing to pay $10, well, gosh darn it, Adam's paying $10. If Barb's willing, her maximum price is $9, she's going to have to pay $9. If Casey was willing to pay up to $8, well, he's going to pay up to $8. So there's no consumer surplus. All right, so let's go ahead and forge our way through into monopolistic competition. All right, and also remember, if you've got any questions, go ahead and throw them in chat. I'll pick them up as I kind of move through some of the unit parts. So monopolistic competition, if I were to put it on a range, if you've got on one side of your range, many sellers, you've got perfect competition. On the absolute opposite side, you have monopoly. Well, monopolistic competition, despite its name, to be nice about it, despite its name, monopolistic competition is fairly similar to perfect competition in terms of sort of structure. They have many sellers, but not many. Okay, there's a lot of them. They also have differentiated products. So they're not identical, and I'm going to explain that in a second. So they're not identical, and they do need to advertise for it to say, hey, this product is better than the other one. And you actually have lots of advertising. And advertising in AP Econ is going to have another name. So they may say advertising, or they may say non-price competition. So next time you're watching the Super Bowl, you can turn to whomever you're watching it and say, I very much enjoy these non-price competition spots between games. And your friends will look at you oddly and then not share the chicken wings with you. It would be very sad. So non-price competition equals advertising. There are lower barriers to entry, but they're not no barriers to entry. There's some barriers to entry. Usually it's price and sometimes franchising packets, but it's not impossible. And let's see. And you have many different price makers, which means there's some control over price. Okay, so let's use a really famous example with monopolistic competition, and that's fast food restaurants. Now, most fast food restaurants in the US, they sell hamburgers. And I want you to kind of think in your head how many different hamburgers there are, and are they the same burger? For example, is the Whopper from Burger King the same as a Big Mac from McDonald's, or even just a hamburger from McDonald's? What about a Culver's Butterburger, or a Hardee's, whatever the burger that is? A Wendy's burger where it's got the square, so it looks like it's more than a circle burger, but that's just an optical illusion. The beef is there. So you have, every restaurant has a different kind of spin on, or a different take on its burger, and they're all going to argue that they have the best burger. So how do they do this? Well, they're going to do this using non-price competition. So this is where even chicken sandwiches, recently we just saw Popeyes go up against Chick-fil-A for who has the best chicken sandwich. And so they did a bunch of advertising campaigns. So you've got Chick-fil-A saying, eat more chicken on the side. You've got Popeyes saying, well, at least we're open on Sundays. So you've got these little moments of they're selling the same product, but it's not exactly the same. They're differentiated, kind of a different take. Also, you may have completely different products. For example, you may have not just you may have companies that are selling things like toothpaste and makeup wipes and shampoo, that's kind of the same types of products, but very different and patent protected individual products. So monopolistic competition is going to share a lot in terms of perfect competition, in terms of they've got more sellers. They only have slight control over prices, but it's very much like a monopoly in that you're going to still have inefficiency, meaning you have a split marginal revenue and demand curves. All right. Once again, please go ahead and throw questions into the chat. Happy to help. So once again, also, if we've got our ATC, our MC, our MR, we got all our cost curves there. Yes. Oh, Angela, what a great question. Yes. Monopoly is one seller at the very, very, very end of the spectrum of market structures. Mono means one. Monopolistic, it has some monopoly-like features, but it's a lot more related to perfect competition. So yes. Oh, good job. Thank you, Shreya. Got that one. So we've got it. So for monopolistic competition, this is going to be a little different than perfect competition and monopoly. And I want you to really watch this. Okay, so go ahead and graph with me. Go ahead and throw your axes up first. Go ahead and split your MR and your D curves. Go ahead and get your MR and your ATC. Try to copy this along as much as possible. Now remember, what happened in the short run with perfect competition? In the short run, perfect competition had if there was a profit to be made, well then Eep and Eel. You remember Eep? There's an eel. If there's a profit, entrance eliminates profit. So more companies are going to enter into the market. They're going to eat away at the profit until its economic profit equals zero, and then there's no incentive to continue on. So we've got, if there's profit in a monopoly, they're keeping it. Because remember, in a monopoly, the firm is the market. The industry, the firm, that business, that one business in a monopoly, that business is the industry. Whereas in monopolistic competition, you got a lot of sellers. They control their little prices on products. So some control over price, but it's not that hard to enter into their industry. So what do you think is going to happen with profit? Is it going to be like a monopoly, which keeps the profit? Or is it going to be more like a perfect competition where entrance is going to eliminate that profit? Go ahead and answer in chat if you can. And I'm going to take a sip of tea. If there is profit, that means that you're going to have more sellers entering that market. So in the short run, yes, we are going to have economic profit. Now, I want you guys to watch this. Okay, take a look at what happens here. As more sellers enter the market, it's not the cost curves that change. All right, everybody watching? It's not the cost curves that change. I'll go back, don't worry. So if we go back, come back, here we go. It's the demand curve and the MR curve that changes, right? Because that entrance is going to, or those companies entering the competition, that's what's going to change things. So I want to go back real quick when we saw profit. Eyes go where first when you're talking about any market structure? You go to MR equals MC. Drop your line, drop your anchor. Oops, come back. No. Drop your anchor at where MR equals MC. And then you're going to plant your flag to go to the price point, go to where demand hits, and that's going to determine your price. Great. So firms, so again, this is where non-price competition comes in. In the long run, there is no economic profit. And look at where things are hitting. So look at where MC intersects with ATC. Remember, at that point, that's the minimum ATC. So you should be thinking efficiency. If you're not, you will. So if they're asking for long run, so if it's an FRQ that's asking for monopolistic competition in the long run, this is what your graph needs to look like, because it needs to have no economic profit. So demand shifts as firms enter and exit a market. Each firm is going to carry something unique in their product. So if a firm exiting or entering, it's going to impact the demand curve itself. For example, even Chick-fil-A getting rid of its coleslaw is going to change the market because that was a unique thing. All right. So you should be asking yourself, are they productively efficient? Are they productively efficient? And the answer is no. All right, they're not productively efficient because the price should equal the minimum ATC, and you can see it's not minimum ATC. We're not where MC is going to intersect with ATC, and they're not allocatively efficient. So we are producing. Okay, thank you. I forgot to hit do not disturb, but don't worry, I have now. Sorry about that. All right, so they are not productively efficient, means that they're not putting their price at the minimum ATC, and they are not allocatively efficient too, meaning that they're producing less than what is socially optimal. Well, why? And that's where we got to talk about excess capacity, and this is what fools people, a few people. So firms in monopolistic competition have what we call excess capacity, and the reason is they are not productively efficient by choice. Why could they? Is it possible for that price to be put at the minimum ATC? Is it possible that they could lower their price to increase demand and hit that socially optimal quantity? Yes, it absolutely is. Why aren't they choosing that? Because that wouldn't be profit. That's not where MR equals MC, because the MR line is split from demand curve. So because monopolistic competition, or any firm in a monopolistic competition structure, is not at that MR, it's not where MC intersects with the ATC, it's there by choice. And so it means they could produce, but they would rather stay at MR equals MC to maximize the profit. So the gap between, and this is where it gets tricky, it is not, that gap is not where D is intersecting with MC. Careful, careful. This is where the lowest trough of ATC is. And the only place we're going to find that is where MC intersects with the ATC line. It might be on the demand curve. It's usually not. Okay. So excess capacity is that distance between the productive efficiency line. So it's going to be that space between that gap. Think of it as if you've ever gotten some soda or some beverage and you're like, wait a minute, somebody drank out of this because it's a little, the level of your beverage is a little high, is a little lower than what it normally is. You're like, wait a minute, there's excess capacity in here. Excess does not mean it's overflowing. Excess capacity means there could be more stuff in here. You could be more productive. All right, now let's get into it in the time we've got, because here we go. Let's talk about oligopoly. And this is where a lot of people have a ton of fun. So oligopoly, thankfully, you probably will not have to graph this. Probably. We haven't been asked to graph this yet, and I hope that trend continues. It might pop up in the multiple choice section, so I'm going to show you the different types of oligopoly graphs, but the kink curve you probably won't need, and that's okay. But you need to understand the concept of it. Oligopoly is very close to a monopoly. So if you had to kind of pair things together, monopolistic competition and perfect competition are sort of on a team. They're kind of like cousins. They're sort of related. Perfect competition is in a league on its own, but perfect competition, monopolistic competition kind of hang out on the mini seller side, but oligopoly and monopoly kind of function the same. So there's the difference is instead of one company controlling the market, you have a few firms, less than 10, usually less than 6. All right, you have only a few firms in this market. So we're talking cell phone services or mobile phone services. So AT&T, Verizon, there's not a whole lot out there. Airlines are another one. You've only got a few major carriers. And they're going to there's lots of advertising for this, but there are high barriers to entry. All right. You cannot just win the lotto, call up your local international airport and say, hey, I would like to fly some planes out of here. Can I get that next week? They're going to laugh at you. Why? Because you're lucky to get a jetway in a year if they can get the contracts there. There's laws involved with joining airlines. There's you have to get into hubs. You have to pay for those takeoff moments. Very, very high barriers to entry. Also, oligopolies are price makers, just like a monopoly is. They are a price maker. They're not a price taker. They are the price maker. They have differentiating products as well as identical. These are different types of companies. For example, can you really tell the difference between Verizon and AT&T when it comes to cell phone service? I hopefully they don't sponsor us, but they don't. But it's like, I hope when we say that internet service, usually that's kind of an identical service, that it's just hopefully access to the internet or cell data. There might be a few. What's the real difference? Maybe advertising, maybe packaging, maybe products, but that could be an identical product. It also could be differentiated. For example, do they have Android? Do they have iPhones? That's another one too. If you want to talk about oligopolies there, computers or computer manufacturers, it depends on the type of market. The problem is that when you only have a few firms, but they're that powerful and they are price makers, they have to do something called strategic pricing. And again, know your terms. Strategic pricing, you will also see this term called mutual interdependence, like highlight, underline, whatever you need to do, because you need to know that. Mutual interdependence means that the companies have to plan their price based on what they think the other company is going to will price the competing good. This is called game theory. So game theory is where we're going to have a systematic assessment of pricing options to find that profit maximizing choice. Because remember, we are going to profit maximize no matter what. So a couple of terms before we walk through an example of this. So there's types of strategies. So if one competitor is just going to do the same thing no matter what, because they're going to make a profit with either option, that's what we call a dominant strategy. And this one, you're going to have to see it to actually kind of really get it. And don't worry, but you've got dominant strategies. You also have what's called the Nash equilibrium. If you've ever seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, you could talk all about this and kind of watch John Nash, and a very interesting take on John Nash, actually. But you can watch this, and kind of he does a very interesting description of the Nash equilibrium. Outcome at that point is the result of both competitors having no incentive to change their strategy, basically saying that they're making the best deal they can. They're not happy about it, all right? They would like to make more profit, but it's the best they can do. Because oligopolies are going to be profit-seeking, they're going to have the initial desire to collude. All right, so for example, if you all are taking the same econ test, the natural tendency is going to be, hey, what did you get for number one? Hey, you want to share your homework with me? Hey, the natural initial desire is to collude. All right. So you can't hold hard feelings for cheaters on this one, because the natural instinct is to collude. But the second instinct, you want to be like, hey, I'll give you the answers to this quiz if you give me the answers to the other quiz. But since you're competitors, what are you going to do? They're going to give you answers to the quiz, and you're going to give them the wrong answers. If the initial desire is to collude, meaning to work together, but then you want to take advantage of the collusion, you want to cheat them to get that, because remember, we're profit maximizing, and you want to take advantage of the collusion to pretty much at the expense of your competitors. All right, so this is what your game theory matrix looks like. Go ahead and write this down. I'm going to walk you through how to do this. Okay, so we've got firm X and firm Y. And it's going to... Oh, hang on, Tiana. Here we go. Now, first off, this is a very, very, very scaled down model. Remember, oligopoly, you've got 10 of these companies with they've got different strategies with all 10 different pricing. All right, so step one, first thing, you get this matrix, and you're going, okay, what do I do? So you've got firm X. Firm X can either advertise or not advertise. Firm Y can either advertise or not advertise. So if firm Y advertises and firm X advertises, well, firm X is going to make $100 out of this, and then firm Y is going to make 50. So we're going to just help ourselves out here. Take a second and get organized. So what I want you to do, now that I've given you a little bit of time to copy this down on a piece of paper, I want you to pick a firm, any one, all right, either X or Y, and I want you to put a circle around their outcomes. So for firm X, this one, the one that is vertical, firm X, it will always be to the left. All right, so I'm going to put a circle around them. So my first step is just organizing to keep myself straight. So I'm going to go throw a circle around firm X. You can do it to firm Y. If that makes more logical sense to you, do it. All right, so but we want to keep them separated. Whatever you do for one firm, do not do it to the other, because you're going to get confused. All right, so we've got firm X and firm Y. We've picked a firm, we put circles around them. Everybody with me? We're all doing this, great. Step two, what I want you to do is put a star or pick the most profitable choice based on the other firm's options. Okay, so firm X, it has to look at what firm Y is doing. So I want you to think vertically. So if firm X is vertical, so are its choices. So if firm Y advertises, firm X can either advertise or not advertise. If it advertises, it gets $100. If it doesn't advertise, it's only going to get 85. Which one is it going to choose? Well, it's going to choose 100. All right. So we are going to pick the choice based on the other firm's options. So, and then I want to put a star around those. So pick the most profitable choice and mark it with a star. So I want, if firm Y advertises, well, firm X definitely wants that $100 over the 85. And if firm Y doesn't advertise, well, then 75 is more than 55. So I want that. Notice how the options change. All right. Because firm X can advertise or it doesn't advertise. It all depends on what firm Y does. We would say firm X does not have a dominant strategy because it's in two different columns here. Whereas, let's look at firm Y. Now we're going to do this with the other firm. All right, now we're going to repeat the process on the other side, but we're going to go super slow because it's really easy to get these confused. So remember, if firm X was vertical, well, then we're going to look horizontal here. All right, so with firm Y, does firm Y want $50 or $65? So if firm X advertises, firm Y can either earn $50 by advertising or it can earn 65. Well, it wants 65. All right. So it's going to want 50 is going to be less than 65. So it wants the 65 and it wants 85 over 60. So I've put little stars where it is. Now notice, no matter what firm X does, firm Y is not going to advertise. Either direction, it's more profitable if they don't advertise. If that's the case, because they're all in the same spot, it's the same decision, we would say that firm Y has a dominant strategy because it doesn't advertise at all. All right, so so this would be our step 4. It chooses not to advertise in both of firm X's scenarios, thus it has a dominant strategy. And you guys can see how you can goof this up sometimes because it's like, oh wait, one's vertical, one's horizontal. There you go. So we're going to call this the dominant strategy. All right, now firm X, we talked about this before, since they're in two different, they react in two different ways to both scenarios. They do not have the dominant strategy. But what about the Nash equilibrium? Where is the Nash equilibrium? Where are they going to go? Because if firm Y is going to not advertise no matter what, well, what's firm X going to do? Firm X is going to get the biggest bang for its buck if firm Y doesn't advertise. So its options, it can either get $75 or $55. Well, which one does it want? It wants the $75. Thank you very much. So the box with both stars in it, that's where they're both going to go. That's going to be the Nash equilibrium. They're not happy about it because remember, firm Y firm Y is pretty happy, but firm X really would like that $100. Thank you very much. But they're willing to take the 75 because they know firm Y has a dominant strategy. So the Nash equilibrium is going to be where both of them are, where both cost or both profits are maximized. So that's profit maximization in an oligopoly. Is that where both the stars are the highest profitability it has. All right, so real quick, I know we're a little over time, but we're going to just kind of go through this real quick. So there's 3 types of graphs for oligopolies. It's likely, but not impossible. I mean, technically, it's still on the curriculum that you have to graph it. But 2 of them, well, one of them, it doesn't have a graph, so it's a great multiple choice question. The second one is a monopoly, and the third one is kind of bizarre, and they don't ask you about it usually. But knock on wood, because I would hate for them to have to graph an oligopoly for a non-colluding oligopoly. All right, so let's talk about price leadership. This one doesn't have a graph at all. So the first type of oligopoly is price leadership, and this is just when you have, it's not colluding. Colluding is illegal in the United States. All right, it's not colluding, but usually you have kind of a brand leader in the industry. You'll have, for example, like Apple for a long time, or Bill Gates with Windows for a very long time was kind of the trend setter for all these different industries. And so whatever Windows did or whatever Bill Gates and Microsoft did, the rest of the Silicon Valley kind of followed for a little bit until they didn't anymore. So that it was price leadership just means we kind of wait to see what this does, and then we're going to follow them. Problems, though, come up when some firms start unfollowing. This happens with airline industry if American Airlines raises its price and Delta is probably going to raise its price at the same time, They all kind of work together. It's not colluding, but they're just kind of following the leader. But let's say that American Airlines raises its price and Delta's like, ha, I've got you. And they lower their price real quick. That's when we get a price war, because now American has to like drop their prices to assert dominance and price leadership again. You also have colluding oligopolies. These are illegal in the US. They still happen, but they're illegal in the US. And the US, you kind of know them better as cartels. Cartels effectively work as a monopoly because they set the price and the output of all firms in the industry. And if you don't obey, you get punished by the cartel. So oil cartels, for example, you can get, they won't deliver oil to you. So OPEC is one of these guys. The graph is going to be identical to a monopoly graph because the cartel enforces their prices. You graph it like monopoly and you're good to go. All right. The non-colluding oligopoly, this is your game theory one that we just went over. This is what it looks like on a graph. If you see this at all on your multiple choice, you know it's a non-colluding oligopoly. It has a kinked curve. So non-colluding oligopolies, this is the choice. The kink there, the change, the place where the MR kind of splits in two, it represents the two choices. And it's going to show the interdependence of the decisions on the firm. So you've got what they call a kink curve, meaning you've got a price at equilibrium with D, it's going to break. The MR curve is going to kind of disappear and then come back down. Again, just kind of know it by sight. Hopefully you will not have to graph this. It hasn't been asked yet on FRQ, popped up on MCQs for a while. And I'm going to take, since I went over time a little bit, I'm going to take a couple of minutes here, if you don't mind. If you've got some questions, go ahead and throw them in chat. Happy to help answer them if possible. We've got Sharia, who's just amazing. If you have not hung out in our Discord and gotten some help from her, she is just amazing. So I'm a high five. I couldn't ask for a better TA. She's probably a future econ teacher, or hopefully a future economist. Okay, I'm not necessarily seeing the questions yet. All right, so guys, I'm going to, we'll go ahead and end the stream tonight, but I'm available on Discord. Sharia's there. We pop around through the week. Get ready, mark your calendars for Unit 5. Thank you so much for hanging out and for learning some econ and learning some micro. I'm real grateful you guys are here, and I'm so grateful you're really putting in the effort to actually do very well in this exam. Wow, what a year it's been so far. Can you believe it? So great to see you all here. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much.